to go back to the DJ Uiagalelei conversation, if he doesn't play well, if he's inconsistent, I think Mike Norvell is going to have a short leash because he's had such a successful guy in Jordan Travis, and Luke Kromenhoek is there. Brock Glenn is there. I think he's going to look to those guys if he's not getting what he wants out of DJ.
No, I think he is a short leash, and I think you also can't deny the talent. And yes, I understand that Denny trains him, but like Luke Kromenhoek is highly regarded nationally as well, was an Elite 11 guy, and while I think across the board the consensus is maybe physically he needs a year in a college weight room. I mean, we saw what Brock Glenn could do last year, and certainly he got thrown into the fire as a true freshman, so I don't want to knock him and say that he's a finished product, but there is talent there in that room that if DJ was to struggle, could you say, once again, the standard is the standard, and if he's not performing to it, I'm going to give the next guy in line a try, especially for me when you look at that schedule.
How quickly do you think Norvell would do that?
Well, that's the thing, is the schedule plays a massive role in this. And here's the thing. I don't want to downplay you Georgia Tech fans, you Boston College fans, Memphis fans out there.
Hey, we heard Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech could be a top 3 team in the ACC per Myles Garrett of Fox 5 Atlanta. Not Taylor Dahl and I, but per Myles Garrett. Not that Myles Garrett, the other one. If you can't beat Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, Cal, and SMU to set up what would, in essence, most likely be a showdown with a 1-loss Clemson team, a 2-loss Clemson team perhaps, but probably a 1-loss Clemson team because they do have to face Georgia to begin the year. I just can't help but look at that and say, then you shouldn't be the starting quarterback at Florida State if Florida State is actually a playoff contender.
But you could also say that with that first half of the schedule, if the games are easy, if the margin of victory is large, then all of a sudden you have to go take on teams that are more talented and then you could get exposed. Right, like at that point, did you not have stiff enough competition to start the year? But I do think when you play in Ireland, I feel like that's a whole nother ball game, and that's obviously how they start the season a week before Florida takes on Miami, and so I think there is pressure on Florida State and certainly DJ. And if I'm Mike Norvell, if I see him have a game where he has multiple turnovers, I'm certainly going to be nervous, especially, like you said, if it's early in the season when that happens.
Yeah, I don't think if, let's say he was to go 5-0, and then let's say he just, like, looks abysmal against Clemson, like, I don't think you can pull him in the Clemson game. I think you have to let him battle through it. He's a 6-year senior. And at this point, he's quote-unquote won your locker room, and he's won your team and led you to 5 wins.
But remember, he's returning in that Clemson game to a team that didn't want him anymore.
That's true.
Sweeney, and so there's the extra pressure there in and of itself, too.
It's just going to be hard. Like, when do you cut the cord? I trust Mike Norvell to cut that cord if you need to, but once you go back, there is no going back. Because then you're basically saying we're riding with whoever the young gun is with warts and all.
Well, I mean, Nick Saban, we just talked about it. He did it with Jalen Milroe last year. He said, you're not playing your best. I need you to sit down. But he had full faith that once he reinstated him the next week, that he would play well. And he did. I mean, that doesn't work for every program.
But that's also Jalen Milroe, who's a young player who, yes, has been at Alabama for a year and learned behind Bryce Young. But that's a young player. If your 6th-year graduate transfer quarterback who's supposed to come in on a 1-year deal, essentially, and be a veteran voice for you, and if he's not performing up to snuff and you bench him, like there's no going back.
Yeah. But also, Florida State fans at that point in time will be mad at Mike Norvell because this is what fans do.
Yeah. Right.
You picked the wrong transfer quarterback.
True.
You should have gotten...
Now play the young kid.
Right. You should have gotten Cam Ward, or you should have gotten Dylan Gabriel. You should have gotten somebody who was better than the guy that you got.
And of
That's
course,
how they'll react.
The hope is that we don't even have to have this conversation. The hope is that DJU, whether
not for Lauren.
Right. But
she does not.
I'm abstaining from
the
that.
hope is that DJU, whether on his own accord or because of the treasure trove of Alabama transfers, as well as, for what it's worth, a wide receiver room that was loaded last year, and I think it's still loaded. I mean, you're bringing Hakeem Williams back, Ja'Kai Douglas, Deuce Spann. Those guys played, like, significant snaps for you. Yeah. And then you bring in Malik Benson from Alabama, too. Like, that's as legit a wide receiver room as I think you're going to see in the ACC. And you couple that with, again, he adds Roydell Williams from Alabama to the running back room. Lawrence Toafila has been there, I feel like, since Nam. And Keziah Holmes looks really good, at least in the UNF practice last year, and then a couple other spurt moments throughout the course of last season. And so,
which they're coming back to UNF. I'm excited to see them
right,
up close
exactly. So that's where I just look at this and I'm like, you know what? If the talent that Mike has gotten in the portal can elevate DJU's shortcomings, that is just as much of a victory for him as it would be for a complete renaissance for DJU's career.
Or if DJU can play the way he did. We talked about it with Myles Garrett, I believe, when we were talking about the way he played against Notre Dame COVID year.
Because Myles was there. He covered that game.
There was like 8 touchdowns in that game, and he threw 4 or 5 of them. Like, you saw glimpses of what DJ could be. So if you get even close to that, they can be a competitive football team.
Oh, yeah. Because they're in the ACC, they'll be a competitive football team even if they don't end up having DJU play well. Like, if they end up having to go with one of the young guys, they'll still pretty much mow through that schedule because it's the ACC, which is exactly why I wouldn't have made the decision, but that's why the College Football Playoff Committee felt comfortable leaving Florida State out, even with the Jordan Travis injury certainly being the massive factor, but because they were like, well, it's the ACC and we're going to pick a different conference.